I am the preacher man, Preacher Van. It's a blessing to be with you. We have an 8.5-mile journey going around the nation's oldest city, St. Augustine.
I'm excited.
We have 21 stops ahead of us, and you can get off or on at any stop.
No.
Please keep all hands and feet inside. Keep all your personal belongings next to you. If we drop something, we cannot go back and get it. So please keep all your personal belongings next to you. You remember that old tune, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492? I don't know how the second verse went, probably same as the first, but Ponce de Leon was the first mate to Christopher Columbus when he came over here. Ponce went down and was the very first governor in Puerto Rico. Ponce de Leon, he did not run for a second term. No. He ran to the shipyard, got him a ship, and went back to his first love, exploration. He went searching for the island of Bimini. He never did find it, nor did he find the Fountain of Youth. What he did find, though, was much more valuable to King Philip of Spain, and that was the Gulf Stream. Now, when the captains used the Gulf Stream, they could get back to Spain 3 weeks quicker. And King Philip of Spain could get his gold and silver back that much faster from the New World. Admiral Pedro Menendez, along with Father Lopez, they came over here and landed September the 8th of 1565. They landed just to the left where that big cross is out there, and they had the very first Catholic Mass on American grounds. That Mass took place again September the 8th of 1565. Now, we needed to get our children educated. Thankfully, we had this building right in front of us here, the red brick building. That is the 1910 Orange School building. I couldn't show you the chemistry classes there on the front. We'll have to show you those when we come back around. But they paid teachers a whopping $1 a day to teach our students grades 1 through 12. But we needed to get the children to school and home from school. They didn't have school buses, so they used a horse and buggy. And they paid the buggy drivers $1 a day as well, $20 a month. Now, as we're going in this parking lot here at Potter's Wax Museum, Stock 3, we can look back on the school. You'll see the 2 towers on the front. That's where they put the chemistry classes up there in those towers. They put them up there just in case they mixed something up that blew up. It wouldn't blow the whole school up, just their classroom. And see, they were absolutely, thinking ahead. They built 2 of them in case one of them did blow up. They could keep the other kids going to school in the other building. But neither tower has redone bricks, so they're both safe, and they never blew up. Now, stop 3 is Potter's Wax Museum. Friends, if you'd like to get off here, they have over 150 figures inside the Wax Museum that look identical like the way they looked in real life. Look on the right there, that's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. right there. Notice how real he looks. They use real height and size on the right there, and they use real human hair. They pull it 1 strand at a time through the scalp 1 time, and there's actually 10,000 hairs. There's actually 100,000 hairs in a head of human hair. Now, a little about Henry Flagler. He's the one with John D. Rockefeller and William Warden. The 3 of those started the Standard Oil Company, well, better known as Exxon. That's what he started when he stayed here on his 2nd honeymoon. He was from Ohio. He saw how beautiful it was here. He said, you know, I'm going to make St. Augustine into a resort town where thousands of generations will come and enjoy. And that's what he did. Built it into a resort town. We'll learn how he did that as we go along. Right now, stop number 2 is the Visitor Information Center. That's that building through the left over there. That's the last coquina building that was built with a red tile roof. That was built by the WPA workers in 1938. They could not build the building any bigger than 35 feet or 2 stories. That's why you see several buildings and not just one big tall one. Now, the original cowboys started out here in St. Augustine. They were called craqueros. Now they used big bullwhips to pop the tops of palm trees off. They boiled that down and made swamp cabbage out of it. Now Florida was purchased in 1821 from Spain. And they actually had this purchase in 1821. There was a big yellow fever epidemic caused by mosquitoes. It actually killed a third of the population. Well, we needed a place to bury all those folks, and on the right is the Huguenot Cemetery. You might say, preacher, there's only 93 tombstones. How could that be a third of the population? They buried 15 to 20 bodies in each grave. The last person going in the grave, their name went on the tombstone. No other records, no other documents, just that information on the tombstone. Now this wall we're going through here is called the Kubo line. That was the northern boundaries of St. Augustine. It's a palm log wall. And this went from the fort all the way west. They had these Spanish bayonets on the right. They were on the north side of the wall that kept anybody from climbing over. They're very sharp, very pointed. They will poke your eye out. Along this wall, they had 9 redoubts. R-E-D-O-U-B-T. Talk about, oh, that's another song here. This is the Santo Domingo redoubt over here on the right. That was big enough for a military man with a rifle and a cannon. He'd roll that around to each cutout. If he needed to, he could shoot through it, and he kept all the front lines safe. These city gates were built in 1808, and those are made out of coquina. If you wanted to get in or out of the city, you had to go through those city gates, and they closed in dusk. If you didn't make it in by dusk, well, you spent the night in the swamp. They didn't open the gates until the next morning. The fort is built out of coquina. They completed it in 1695. It actually takes 1 to 3 years for one block of coquina to dry in the sun. That's why it took 23 years to build the fort. That's a lot of coquina blocks there. Now stop 5 is the Colonial Quarter and the Pirate Museum here. If you would like to get off here, they have over 600 authentic pirate artifacts in the Pirate Museum. Now, as we're looking left, we see the old fort there, and then that piece of land that comes into view just over the fort to the left. That is Anastasia Island. That's where they got all the coquina. They had to ferry the coquina back and forth across the intercoastal waterway to build the fort. This is actually a very narrow, curvy road. It is curvy for a couple of reasons. One, when they had militaries marching, they wouldn't be able to march in a straight line very far because there is a curve. And there could be an ambush set up on the other side of the curve so they couldn't march. And the cannons, if they shot a cannonball this way, it would not go very far because it would hit a curve. Now, when the wind blows, it blows between these buildings. Makes a nice tropical breeze for the inner city to keep it cool. This building on the left, that's much like a Spanish dwelling. The Spanish did not have chimneys, and they cooked over live fires in their kitchens. It made a lot of smoke. Babies cannot deal with smoke. They need good fresh air. So they did have a high infant mortality. A lot of babies died. All the windows they had was right here on the right. Just a rectangular window that just had wooden slats in it. That would not keep the little animals out, kept the big ones out, but you might wake up and have a raccoon eating breakfast with you on your table. It wasn't until the British came in and brought the idea of chimneys and glass for the windows, they were actually able to get the ventilation going out better. Now we're going toward the Minorcan quarter here. The Minorcans worked on plantations back in the 17 and 1800s, and everything went fine until the Great Freeze of 1895. And when that happened, they actually froze all the crops the freeze did, and nothing else grew. No citrus, no apples, bananas, everything stopped growing. The freeze killed everything. And the plantation owners went on their own way, leaving the Minorcans behind to fend for themselves. Well, it wasn't until Father Camps, he was a Minorcan as well, but he had a parish here in St. Augustine. He had a church. He went down south about 60 miles and gathered up all the Minorcans and brought them back here so he could feed them. And the governor took pity on them, actually gave them this section of St. Augustine, and they called it the Minorcan Quarter. Now we're going into the Gilded Age where we run into Henry Flagler. He wanted to build St. Augustine into a resort town, but to do so he needed a little piece of property just south of us that he actually had a little wooden church on it. He needed that property to build the Alcazar Hotel. A friend of Henry Flagler's, his name was Franklin Smith. He had just come from Europe, and he learned about poured concrete while he was in Europe. He told Henry Flagler all about it, and Mr. Flagler told the preacher, "I'll build you a brand new church out of poured concrete." Elder Wright, the Grace United Methodist Church, is the first poured concrete church in Florida, built in 1895. They put a parish on it for the preacher to live in, so he was able to get, Flagler was able to get the property he needed now to build the Alcazar Hotel. That's stop 10. We'll show you that as we go forward. Now, when the Baptists saw what the Methodists had got, they come around and, Mr. Flagler, will you build us a church too? I can sound like that. You can too if you like. I'm Baptist. They don't mind. They wanted to have a church. Mr. Flagler told them, you can have a church. I will give you the property if you can raise $10,000 in 2 years. He said, I'll give you the property to build a church on. And they did. They had the bake sales, cookie sales. In 2 years, they raised $14,000. And up here on the right, the ancient city church was built. But Mr. Flagler lived in the neighborhood. One caveat is, he said there could not ever be a church bell in that tower, and there never has been. He didn't want to hear church bells ring while he was drinking coffee, reading the paper. So they actually got the Nobel Prize. They actually built, that's right, that church with Nobel in it. On the right and on the left, Mr. Flagler built these homes for his management of the railroad, the Flagler Railroad. He built it for the CEO and the CFO of the railroad as an incentive for them working there. Now his daughter lived in New York. Her name is Jenny Louise. She was pregnant, had a little girl named Marjorie. Marjorie didn't live but a few hours, she died. Mr. Flagler sent for her and told her, Jenny Louise, he said, honey, come down here, I'll take care of you. I've got a lot going on in St. Augustine. He actually sent her fare to come down on a private yacht. She was actually coming down on the private yacht, but then started thinking about her daughter. She got ill, probably worried about her little daughter that passed away, and she ended up getting sick and dying herself. But that was the Ponce de Leon Hotel. It had 450 lavish rooms in it. See that smokestack? That smokestack is where he had 2 coal-burning generators that burned and made electricity. Now this is in 1888. Mr. Flagler had electricity here in his hotel before the White House had electricity. Thomas Edison was a close friend of Henry Flagler's. He actually made sure that his buddy Henry had electricity in his very first hotel. If you or I came to stay here, it would be for the entire winter season, December to April. It would cost us $9,000 to stay here. The only people that didn't have to pay that much were the U.S. presidents. There were 5 U.S. presidents that came and stayed here. The last one being Lyndon B. Johnson in the 60s. Now this became the Flagler College in the mid-60s. Now this is where they had all of it in here, but nothing could compare to the rooms. It was just lavish, poured concrete. They had really nice rooms, but they had no entertainment. They had a really nice restaurant though. That's the brown room that's rounded off, coming off the hotel over here on the right. That was the restaurant Ponce de Leon. Another one of Henry Flagler's friends was Louis Comfort Tiffany. You've heard of Tiffany stained glass? Well, friends, Mr. Tiffany put 78 Tiffany stained glass windows around that restaurant. You can see through there, the light shining, but that is kind of cloudy because that is bulletproof glass we're looking through, and there's bulletproof glass on the inside. That is 1888 original Tiffany stained glass windows. Those today are insured for $130 million. That is some expensive glass there, friends. On the right, between these posts, you see that chain with the ball and spikes. That is where they have called harbor chain. It was about 4 feet in the harbor, went left to right. Boats could pass over it without a problem. But those ball and spikes, if they had a pirate ship coming in the area, they would roll the barrels around and raise that chain up to about 2 feet underwater. You still couldn't see it with your eyes. But when the ship passed over it, the pirate ship, it would rip the keel out of the bottom of it, making a big old hole. And that ship would sink. Bloop, 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 right down to the bottom of the harbor. Look at the front of this hotel. The beautiful brick inlaid around the windows. The design and architectural drawings here on the front of the hotel going in with the lions on the pedestals. That's Henry Flagler there on that pedestal. He actually got his hand in his pocket. He was always known to have his hand on his money. And he's actually looking across the street at the bank. And Mr. Flagler was always known to be right. Look at the windows upstairs tilted back. 10 degrees. He's got them tilted so you can see the stars in the sky. And this was 1888 that he built this magnificent Ponce de Leon Hotel. Now, Franklin Smith, the gentleman that told him about the poured concrete, this is where Franklin Smith had his home. It is now the Villa Zareta Museum. He poured one layer of concrete, had to let that set up a few days before he could move the form up. Then he could pour another layer of concrete, had to let that set up a few days. If you look at those joints, you see the round circle on those joints. That's where the forms were. They had to move up each time, and he finished them over with concrete. He did that 20 times. That's why it looks like a big wedding cake with all the layers in it. This was built 1883. There's some of the beauty on the right. You can see in those pictures of some of the beauty inside the Villa Zareta. Now there is a mummy inside here that came from the pyramids. He doesn't say much, he's just in there laying around. This is built after a small design of a palace in Spain called the Alhambra. That's how he built his home. Now they had all of the entertainment inside the Alcazar Hotel you'd ever want. A 24-hour casino inside here. They actually had a Russian day spa and a European night spa inside. They even had a bowling alley to add to the complement of entertainment. Now all the folks from the Ponce de Leon from across the street, they could come over here and play. There was lots of stuff to do. They even had the world's largest indoor swimming pool here in the Alcazar. That gentleman on the left, on the pedestal, that is Pedro Menendez. He's the one that discovered St Augustine in 1565. But look back at this building, the Alcazar Hotel. Just beautiful the way the bricks hang down from the towers. This is where they instituted the Otis elevator, was used inside the Alcazar Hotel. That's where it made its debut here. Now in the back, they had the world's largest indoor swimming pool. This is the deep end coming out here off to the left, the rounded off part. That is now a cafe. That's called the Cafe Alcazar. Get a really good salad. They have really good food inside. And that was the historic Alcazar swimming pool back when. And that was built in 1890, 2 years after the Ponce de Leon. Now back at the back on these 3 parking lots, God bless you, they actually had 3 tennis courts here. That was where you played tennis. On the right, that church you see boarded up, that's where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to preach in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And this is in Lincolnville. Now, historic Lincolnville, they have the Accord Civil Rights Museum here. And that's where they have lots of historic pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King. And this is the very home where they had the first black dentist, Dr. Robert Haley, had an office inside here. Right next door, this is where Mrs. Cora Tyson lives today. She is 98 years old. She was personal friends with Dr. King. In fact, Dr. King would stay in her guest room when he came to town. There's a write-up about Dr. King on the placard. Mrs. Tyson is 98. She would make him dinner, but said Dr. King did not eat much because of his busy schedule. What he loved to do was drink that Southern sweet iced tea. He would drink 3 pitchers of tea every day. And before he went to bed, that 3rd pitcher would be drank. She'd make him some more for the next morning when he got up. Now this road we're getting ready to go across is actually Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. This is one of the avenues. There's only 2. There's another avenue called Dr. Martin Luther King in Atlanta. Dr. King marched on these avenues. There are only 2, St. Augustine and Atlanta. He marched on both of them. All the other cities in the United States have a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. venue, but they're either on road, street, boulevard, parkway, or drive. They're not avenues. Only Atlanta and St. Augustine have the avenues. Why? Because he marched on them. On the left, this is the Yalaha Orange Plantation House. Can you say Yalaha?
Yalaha.
That is Seminole for the word orange. Yalaha. This was all orange groves. Yalaha Orange Plantation. This is where Mr. Flagler would get all of his ice for his hotels.
Oysters on the half shell.
Fish can.
And they used to make 100,000 pounds of ice every day. And everyone that went out fishing would come in and get their catch iced down from the ice plant. Keep all the seafood fresh. Now coming up on the left, this big brown building, this is where they had the Soya Carcaba cigar factory. And this was made, and the ladies, they ruled here because ladies have smaller hands. They could roll a tighter cigar. But men, we had a job too. We would read to the ladies. See, there's 27 stars on this side of the building, representing Florida, being the 27th state. Flagler, Mr. Flagler used to have a hospital right here across from us where the police station is now. That was the Flagler Community Hospital. Used to be right here. All of Mr. Flagler's employees, he would give free health insurance. And they could come and get their free insurance. If they wanted to get insurance for their families, it was only 50 cents a month. Yeah, $6 a year is all it would cost for insurance. Now, this road in front of us is called King Street. This is the very first road that Mr. Flagler paved. Again, the train station was just to the left of us, down a couple of blocks. So when you got off at the train, Mr. Flagler would have the driver holding up a sign with your name on it, much like they do at airports. You would come and get with the driver. He would come out and open your door on the carriage, and then he would bring you down the street in a horse-drawn carriage on a newly paved road. That way you didn't have to ride on holes in the dirt road, as that could be a really bumpy ride. It is now called the Markland House by Dr. Anderson. He was Mr. Flagler's physician for a time, and he actually is the one that built, or had built, the two hand-carved marble lions, and he donated them to the city of St. Augustine in 1927 for the Bridge of Lions. And we'll see that coming up. That goes across the intercoastal. Governor's House, which is a courthouse, that's right here on your left. This is the Governor's House, and it takes a church, which is the next stop. Now right here on the left is a 1887 horse trough. You don't see one of those often. They got that year stamped in the header of it. And when you're coming to the courthouse, which is the Governor's House, to file your papers, your horse, you get some water out there at the horse trough. Now that big white obelisk over there on the left, that is a big monument commemorating the War of 1812. That's a memorial for it. One of the monuments they wanted torn down throughout the United States, but St. Augustine said, we're not tearing it down because we paid for it, and that is our memorial. On the right, you see Ponce de Leon up on that pedestal. Ponce de Leon was the very first governor of Puerto Rico. And on the right, that's the Bridge of Lions, and the two lions that Dr. Anderson donated to the city are on the front of it there. And the one on the left is named Firm. The one on the right is named Faithful. Firm and Faithful have been guarding over the Bridge of Lions since 1927. Now, stop 14 is coming up, and this is the Cathedral Basilica. This is built in 1797. It is the oldest Catholic church in Florida. On the sign out front, it actually has the date September 8th of 1565. That is when Pedro Menendez and Father Lopez landed and discovered St. Augustine. They had the very first Catholic Mass. And then the Cathedral Basilica picked up that date, as they are a Catholic church, and continuated that Catholic religion. Now if you look down on your left on this sidewalk, you'll see a round water meter looking cover. That's actually a government survey marker. That is the Rosario line marker. That is where the end of St. Augustine was. This sidewalk was the end. That was a wall. And it actually ended St. Augustine going to the west. There is, on the right, all that was woods, alligators, and snakes. That was all swampland. Now this church on the right, coming up, this is the Trinity Parish Episcopal Church. It has Tiffany stained glass windows in it, and this third window on the right, Louis Comfort Tiffany actually autographed that window on the inside. This yellow building on the right, if you look at the door handles, you'll see the word Woolworths. That was the original Woolworths back in the 60s. Avonlea Street is coming up on the right. This is the very first paved road in America right there. It's a brick paved road, but it was paved nonetheless. Now this yellow building on the right, this was the original House of Wax. Vincent Price starred in that movie in 1953, House of Wax. It was filmed right here. Now in 1702, Colonel James Moore, he was the governor of the Carolinas. He got mad because the old fort has a Spanish flag flying over it. He brought his armada down here, and he shot cannonballs at the fort for 50 days straight. Well, the fort being built out of coquina, nothing happened to it. When the cannonballs hit the walls, they would either fall down or else the wall would absorb the cannonball, and then we would dig the cannonballs out at night. We would clean the cannonballs up, and we'd shoot them back at Colonel Moore the next day. Well, Colonel Moore did not like that a bit. He got really aggravated and angered, and he came ashore, and right back at the plaza, he threw a hissy fit, and then he burned the whole city down. And the only home that survived, again, was the oldest house. And it did survive because it is made out of coquina. Now the oldest house, this is the only home to survive that fire of 1702. And it is on a complex here. It is built out of coquina. And you are welcome to go in and tour the oldest house. They have tours here every half hour. Now if you look through this rebar fence on the right, look past the second window on the left. You'll see a round circle on the wall. That is actually a cannonball in the wall. The Queen authorized them to build something that was not flammable. This is the 10th fort they built. The other 9 was wood. They burned down. So they got this coquina off of Anastasia Island. There are 450,000 blocks of coquina in this fort. That's why it took 23 years to build it. Now the white you see on the side of the building, that is not paint, that is actually plaster of Paris. And they put that on the fort so it would not absorb any more water. Some of those walls are 13 feet thick. You can see again the size of the fort. This is the largest masonry fort in the United States. It is over 10,000 square feet inside. This watchtower across from the fort, that is built out of wood. That is a 2-story tall watchtower here. And that is so they would watch for pirate ships. They looked for pirate ships coming into the harbor. Now this wall coming off of the fort, this is called the Kubo line. It is made out of sable palm trees. It's a 5-log palm wall. And it actually does keep everybody safe. The only thing they had to get in and out were the city gates. Now the Wardens, William Warden and his family lived in Ohio. The Wardens built this home, and they actually built it back when they were trying to have a son. They wanted to have a son to carry on their name.
I didn't even mean to find that. It was by accident.
But they actually had
That's where they had the Cuban
daughters.
sandwich. That's the English.
They had 13 daughters, to be exact.
No, it's just like accidentally.
Then they had a son. The 14th child was a boy, and the 14th child, Mr. Warden looked at his wife and he said, "Okay, honey, you can rest now." Bless her heart. All 16 of them lived inside of this home with one bathroom. Yeah. The Warden winter home had one bathroom in it. Back in the back here, they have a big Bronco. This was built for the 1987 Denver Broncos, built out of automobile bumpers and motorcycle exhaust pipes. This was built for the Denver Broncos when they won the Super Bowl. But they never did win the Super Bowl. That's why it is in our parking lot still. Yeah. Bless their heart. Marjorie Rawlings, who wrote the best-selling novel, The Yearling, she purchased this home from the Warden estate, did some remodeling, and then added some bathrooms to it. And then Mr. Ripley purchased it and was able to have the 1970s TV show, Ripley's Believe It or Not, on the air, hosted by Jack Palance. Some of you may remember that TV show. It was filmed right here in St. Augustine. Here we're going into the Abbott tract. This is known as Uptown St. Augustine. In the Abbott tract, this is where Lucy Abbott, back in the 1860s, Lucy Abbott inherited 33 acres along here, and she built 129 houses on that land that she had. Back in the 1860s, females were not able legally to own real estate. So she put all of these homes in her brother's name. Out of the 129 homes that she built, there are still 121 houses standing. All these homes you see, Lucy Abbott built. And she built them 160 years ago. That's the remarkable thing. This is where Pedro Menendez and Father Lopez landed on September 8, 1565. And friends, this big cross is 208 feet tall. They put that there to commemorate the first Catholic Mass. And that is the tallest cross they could put up without aviation lights. Now we're going to the oldest resident of St. Augustine. It is actually an oak tree. This oak tree is over 650 years old. Now the deal is, oak trees normally live about 300 years. But they say that this oak tree, because its roots tap into the fountain of youth, perhaps that's why it grew so old. This huge oak tree in front of us actually has to have its limbs trimmed every now and again. But look at the size of the old senator. There is actually a palm tree growing in the middle of it. This tree is over 650 years old. Now, stop 22 coming up is the Fountain of Youth. This wall on the right is called Tabby. It's made out of oyster shell, lime, and water. This is what the village of Saloy was inside. There was the Timucua Indians. They had their village of Saloy inside this wall.
This is really neat to walk around.
And if anybody tried to climb over that wall, they would get cut. And without penicillin, if you got cut, you would definitely get infected. And without penicillin, friends, you would likely lose your arm, or your leg, or your life. On the left is the planetarium. Friends, you can see how to navigate using the stars in the sky at night in the planetarium, and they'll teach you that. Now the next stop coming up is the old jail, Gator Bob's, and the oldest store museum. Now you will be getting a new conductor at the old jail. I am the preacher. I will be taking a break. But I ask you, if you would please, go online to thetripadvisor.com It needs the preacher a review.